folks, this is History 110. This is the Unit 9 materials, The Age of Jackson. So for this week, you just have the exam for this, but also there's several videos. They do a great job. Actually, the Age of Jackson video covers most of this lecture. So this one, for the lecture videos from myself, are going to be a little shorter than usual, less of them. There's also one on the Latin American revolutions. Make sure you watch that video. Make sure you watch that video. It covers more than is in the slides here. And so that is also obviously fair game and will appear on the Unit 9 exam. So we're in the Age of Jackson here. You can see learning goals and objectives. And again, you can see this slideshow. But this is, how many viewed Andrew Jackson as going too far, as he almost made, exercising too much political power, almost as a king. But one of the things here you do start to get in this era expansion of democracy, for some at least, but it is definitely an expansion nonetheless. 1820s and 30s. You get the removal of property qualifications, with the exception of Rhode Island at this point. And then the new states that are going to come in are going to require property ownership. So again, for at least males and white males, there is a increase in voting rights here, and you can see 90% by 1840 of adult white males were eligible. And for the South, though, property qualifications did endure. They're not eliminated until around 1860. But again, for most of the rest of the country is there. Obviously, who's left out of this? Native American women and, of course, African American women at this point, unfortunately, do not have the right to vote. But, part of this movement to get rid of property qualifications reared its head in Rhode Island, as you remember from the last one, which did still have them. And this is what becomes known as the Dorr War. And this is Thomas Dorr here pictured. This is a movement against voting qualifications, property qualifications. They called a People's Convention and elected Dorr as governor. So these are people who weren't allowed to vote, didn't really have the right to, at least that's what extra legal means, constitutional convention. Rhode Island viewed this as treason, and the feds stepped in. John Tyler, president, sent in federal troops. Dorr's sentenced and arrested and served 2 years in prison. But this shows that, the passions and potential dangers, if you continue to exclude male citizens. Eventually, Rhode Island eliminated qualifications for all native-born men, including African Americans. But you can see how already there are those trying to rebel against the lack of them. Here's some more of the materials from this era there for the Dorr liberation and Dorr War. So another thing that you have here, and this is Alexis de Tocqueville, a French author, came over to America, originally studied prisons, and ended up writing this amazing book called Democracy in America. It's still used as a primary source by historians to give a picture of what America is. He's an aristocrat from France, but what he realized is that, to truly understand America, you had to understand the importance of democracy to the American identity, the idea of our political participation. And as always, again, just remember to take a look at the notes. There's lots and lots in the notes for just about every slide here. But Tocqueville on democracy, this is more than just political rights. It was voting as again, it's not just the political set of institutions. It was a habit of the heart, right? This becomes to define the culture and national identity as a whole, that we should be democratic. We had a right to participate. We had a right to group ourselves together, especially here in the public sphere at the bottom, the voluntary associations. These are groups we choose to be a part of. Common ones, PTA, really any group where we want to combine and work together. This belief in equality. Again, you got to remember this, the 1830s, when they say equality, they don't really mean everybody, but again, but this is the idea, and really, this is really comes to help define what it is for American nationalism and all of this. But part of this is why there's more of this. There's an expansion of the printed word during this era. You get steam-powered printing presses, and so that gets things out cheaper. You also get this new sensational journalism. This is, the tabloids. It's still around today. Really shocking headlines that if you read the stories, it doesn't really fit, but, it gets people people like sensationalism. It's almost, unfortunately, journalism becoming, unfortunately in my view, journalism becoming more entertainment than anything else. But you also had, newspapers. By everyone is printing newspapers at this time, so more and more people are getting involved. But the limits of this, as I've said, women, African Americans, Native Americans, not allowed to vote, not allowed to partake in most of this. Why? At the time, they were deemed naturally lacking in capacity for democracy. There's something inherently less than them. Really, nobody saw the irony in this, that they say, the triumph of democracy and all these freedoms, but a majority of the people cannot actually participate here. Indeed, this was a very a racial democracy. It really was demarcated by race, right? Those that was part of the political nation were essentially white, and so this replaced class, which you used to have with the Republican, that only the best should vote and partake, and now it's really American men, white men at this point, had the true political freedoms here. And there's a picture of Jim Crow, later becomes shorthand for segregationist laws, but you start to get in these, these very biased views of African Americans in pop culture here. So other things here with the American system. So this was something originally announced by President James Madison, later promoted by Henry Clay. This was a program of internal improvements, protective tariffs, tariffs or taxes on foreign goods, and Speaker of the House is Henry Clay. Here, and the three pillars of this were new national bank, tariff on manufactured goods from outside, and federal financing of roads and canals. So this is continuing the sort of market system, at least is the idea. So the goal really is to bind the nation together. The bank would provide currency reform and uniform currency, protect American industries and grow them, and become economically independent of Great Britain, and try to get towards competing against them. And you can see more of that here. But there are economic problems here. There's a panic of 1819. There's speculation, and there's runs on the banks. The politics of the panic, this really does impact, turns people more against banks. So they already viewed it against them. And you get the Supreme Court case with McCulloch versus Maryland. The key takeaway for us, there's more to this case, but for our purposes here, is this is a new view of the Constitution, not the strict constructionist view, which was only what's in the Constitution explicitly. This begins to interpret the Constitution more broadly of the powers of Congress and others, and this is still a debatable issue today. But there are more of this, and you'll see this especially in the video. This is really foreshadowing. This is 1820. This is foreshadowing what's going to come in 1860 in the Civil War. Is what to do with new states coming in. Is what do you do with, especially the territory from the Louisiana Purchase? Will these new states be free or slave? And so this is about the expansion of slavery. This is going to prohibit slavery from all remaining territory north of the Louisiana Purchase. Now, if you look at a map of the United States, the majority of the land then, which will become the United States, is not going to become a slave state. This is going to worry the South, obviously, but it's a way of kicking the can down the road to be a problem at the later. It doesn't solve the issues of the expansion of slavery in any ways, and that's really the problem here. This lays bare the looming sectional crisis that's coming, and that the North is about to grow in population, and this is going to lead to the South losing political power, and they're going to be able to outvote them. President John, who will become president, John Quincy Adams, foresaw this would dissolve the Union and lead the Civil War. He was definitely correct on that, and you can see how how it's divided here. This would be the Missouri Compromise line. So all this north of it is going to be slave state. All south, it will be free, and this will be slave states again. But we'll see this rearing its head more going forward. Take a look at the website, the videos for this one, especially on the Latin American Wars of Independence. Monroe Doctrine is also discussed in the video of the Age of Jackson. But here quickly, this is a doctrine that stated the U.S. would oppose any future efforts by European powers to colonize the Americas. Essentially what it says to Europe, we'll stay out of your affairs, you stay out of ours, right? This is, America is going to claim the New World for itself. Like, the U.S. is going to be the a power that's going to exert influence here. This, again, the dominant power for the U.S. in the Western Hemisphere. Really what's going on here, too, this is about economics and commerce, right? That the U.S. is going to have its hand here. This is the cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy even today, later expanded by Teddy Roosevelt and others in the 20th century. So this is an issue. Roosevelt will have his corollary to it later, but this is America. The thing at the time is America doesn't really have the ability to enforce this, but it's the stated goals of the U.S. here. Other things you're going to have, and this is going to lead to Andrew Jackson rising up and getting elected as president. You have what's called the corrupt bargain. Again, very well discussed in the video online, the crash course video. The only person that was able to really generate national support was Jackson, but nobody had enough electoral votes to win the presidency, so this got thrown into the House of Representatives, who then decides on the president. Henry Clay picked John Quincy Adams, even though he had only regional support. Why? Because Clay was a supporter of the American system. I was hoping Adams would be as well. Clay gets appointed Secretary of State once Adams becomes president, so it's looked at as a bargain they made. This is really going to lay the groundwork for the rise of the Democratic Party and Andrew Jackson later. This is early. You can see how different D.C. was back then. But there's other things here. Now, John Quincy Adams comes in. He's the actual author of the Monroe Doctrine. He was even more so nationalist and expansionist. He wanted the U.S. to take over and incorporate Canada, Cuba, Mexico, and others. He argued for a strong federal government and more. So he's very much ahead of his time, where most people are calling for less government power. He's calling for more. And now we're in the era where we actually have photographs of these people. This is him later in life. And there's also Martin Van Buren here. You can read the notes on this. He's really the founder of the Democratic Party. Really turns it into an organization that's able to outreach to citizens and voters, and you can see it in there. And that's really Van Buren's what we need to know for him here. But you begin to see this in 1828. Adams did little to campaign and support his own election. Jackson comes in. Again, doesn't really offer any tangible promises, but he wins a victory here, and you can see a pretty large one. Especially, he's by green here in the Democratic Party, who that's where Jackson will be. The victory is owed to his strength of his popularity and his personal story. In the first slide in the slideshow, you'll see there's a lot of notes on the title slide that talk about his background. A self-made man, a war hero, at least this is the view of him. They had this political party machinery that was able to get the vote out, both legitimately and illegitimately, fake voting, people voting many times in there, so they could really get out the vote more and more. This is the first election in the U.S. to demonstrate the power and change by universal male suffrage, right? The people voting for Jackson were the regular people. Probably would not have voted for Adams, who was, this is the son of John Adams, the founder. And you can see he's the man of the people, and that's President Andrew Jackson there. You can really look at the video on this, but Jackson's, when he gets inaugurated, about 20,000 people are allowed into the White House, and it is just a raucous scene. They're taking stuff from the White House. They view him as the people's president and all that. A very controversial figure, but as we'll see, this is elderly Andrew Jackson later. And this is also the start of truly a party system and popular politics in the United States here. This was a mass activity. People were really engaged. We are far less engaged and far fewer voter participation these days. But it was mass spectacle parties. They used to hold things like really parties in the streets. There were cakes that were baked. There were barbecues. It was an event to go vote. They still do that in some countries. But this was a true community event. And the politicians were like the pop celebrities of the day. More and more. Politics was really part of everything at this point. And so we're actually going to come back on this on the next video, the spoil system. I want to deal with this in full. So we'll continue here in video 2.